Yeah. Okay, it's a pretty good start. I think maybe that these braces could be a little bigger. Next time I'll get Chris to make them a little bigger. They need to be more substantial. But this is a very feminine trumpet. It might be a perfect trumpet for a girl, I think, or a woman, because it's a little lighter. And it has two bells. It has a bigger bell and a smaller bell. Similar to the instruments that I had built for the Bamberg Symphony Orchestra in 1981. That's 40 years ago now, plus 42, going on 43. I happened to be in Japan working with German brass. Oh, actually, it was immer still called the Das Deutsche Blechbläser Quintet. And with the Bamberg Symphony Orchestra in the same year in Tokyo. And the Yamaha people decided to sponsor German brass. They wanted to have a better foothold in Europe selling their instruments. So Enrique got a deal because he was a composer. Enrique Crespo from German brass. You might want to check out some of his wonderful CDs that he did with his ensemble after, well, when I was there some. Not because I was there, but they're pretty interesting. Bach 300 was the first big one we did with a large ensemble. But even before that, I invited him to play in my ensemble. I was talking to Ed Oetting in an earlier YouTube about how I asked Enrique, who was then still the solo trombonist in the Bamberg Symphony Orchestra, and Wolfgang Gag, who was later a solo hornist in Stuttgart Radio, then Munich Philharmonic, a professor in Munich and in Würzburg here as an acting professor. So when they were still looking for to fill the job, and Wolfgang Gag, an excellent hornist, and he was the main hornist of the German brass quintet. And we got this contract with Yamaha. Anyway, got all these instruments, and the thing is, an instrument has to have a soul. It has to have a personality. And the person that made the instrument gives his personality into the instrument. Instrument making is a work of art in itself. And then you bring this resonator, this contraption, this creation, this invention, because it's full of inventions. Like an automobile is full of inventions. It's not just the motor, but it's all the suspension and all. In these days, also with Elon Musk, it's also the battery possibilities, and sometimes a motor in each wheel that's takes the energy from the battery that's in the bottom part of the car itself. Whatever. Getting back to trumpets, the interesting thing about trumpets is that they have different characters of sound through not only their length. This is a C trumpet, more of an orchestral trumpet, but they also have differences in sound because of their construction and because of the valve sections that are used, if they have valves. I mean, you can see here, if you pan over here, there's all kinds of different constructions of instruments and different sorts and whatever. And this is just a small portion of the instruments that I use daily, on a daily basis. But I was in Darmstadt yesterday at Chris Cornford. He's actually a horn maker. He worked for Alexander for a long time, and then he became his own, makes his own instruments. He makes very successful symphonic triple horns, double horns, and he's doing very well. Christopher Cornford in Diebach by Münster, which is by Darmstadt in Germany here. And he worked for Alexander in Mainz for a while. These valve sections are the Sierenbauer valve sections, the Bernhard Sierenbauer. I think he's by Geretsried. It's sort of on the border between Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg. He's, I think, a Schwab. You'd call him, he's Schwäbisch. And these are very, very, very thought-through valve sections because they're made in one block. There's not one valve that's soldered to the next. It's made in one block at one time. So it makes it all, and all these pipes are then sticking through into what the Germans call the Wechsel here, and then they're phrased out afterwards, and so that there are no knuckles here. Even these slides go all the way through. You can see here that this is one slide. It's missing the stopper ring on this side. I don't know why, but these are the valves that I suggested that Zygmunt Kanstelkauf buy from Sierenbauer when we went to Sierenbauer's factory one time. Zig was over here a few times in the late 90s. And I drove I took him one time in my Porsche to and one afternoon we had to get there and back in 3 hours. I don't think I think I shortened his life a little bit. I drove really fast sometimes, and he wasn't really aware that you could go at any speed you want to on the German autobahns, and there wasn't too much traffic that day, so you could really get that old Porsche of mine went 270, which is pretty fast for a car. There's no airbags, no airbags, and no roof. It was a 944 S2. But in any event, that's again comparing cars and things and whatever. I don't want to do that. What's important here is to understand that Steuart is he was what the Germans call an Eigenbrotler. He didn't want anybody working with him because his idea of the quality of the valve sections that he wanted. If he didn't do it himself, it wasn't going to be right, and that's often a problem. Zieg should have trained his two sons. I guess it's Mark, who ended up being the financial boss, and his other son, I'm sorry, what his name is, he was the general sales manager. Anyway, a really nice guy, but he didn't train them about how to build instruments. And if you're going to run a factory, you have to know how instruments are built from the very beginning. You have to be able to get your hands dirty. You have to know how the lathes work. You have to know how the whole production line. You have to be able to bend the bells and whatever. And Zieg lived in his factory after the new one they had made in Anaheim. And anyway, so I got him to buy these valve sections von Steuart that day, and we were going to make a line of rotary valve trumpets because that was supposed to be my specialty for him. I was more or less involved in R&D, but Zieg liked me very much, and he wanted very much for me to be involved. He wanted to sell me his factory, as a matter of fact, but I didn't have the $1.5 million that he wanted as loose change that day. So I don't think that his son Mark would have been very happy about it. He was in the polishing room at that time himself. But in any event, to make a long story short, these are really very, very good valves, and they're made by Steuart, and I still think, even though there are other very good instrument makers and very good valve makers, like Meinl Schmidt and Gerhard Meinl, and a lot of very good valve makers in Germany, besides Mr. Bernhard Steuart, but I'm very fascinated with these because of the construction. In any event, it's about a resonating pipe. And it's about the consistency of that resonation. And it's about how mouthpieces and how lead pipes fit together. This is a lead pipe changeable mouthpiece, trumpet. And this lead pipe comes out, and I can put this one in. This is the instrument that I had made in California originally, and then finished here in Germany. In the late 90s. As a matter of fact, I think I flew to California, and I think at that time, it was over Christmas, and I stayed at Otto Reich's. Otto is from a place called Straubing here in Bavaria, and he was actually the main troubleshooter at the factory. Otto was a very, very fine guy, and I hope he's still alive. I haven't spoken with him in a few months. But he's really getting quite old, and he's really a great guy, and I stayed at his house because, whatever. And a lovely wife and whatever. And Otto, I think Otto has a Canadian citizenship still, because when he left Germany, he went to work for an airplane producing factory in Winnipeg. Well, to make a long story short, these instruments the valve sections especially, that Zygmunt Kansto decided to buy for, to construct B-flat and C trumpets, rotary valve, German trumpets. I eventually bought back from the factory after they actually it's now closed. I don't know what you call that. What do you call that? You call that, when they went bankrupt. I don't think they were bankrupt. I think they just closed because they weren't making any money. And after Zieg died, Mark and his other son, didn't run the factory anymore. Couldn't do it. Didn't know how to do it. It's a big problem to run a factory well. He had 90 workers working for him, most of them from Mexico, and they were unskilled workers that he would train himself. And Zieg never spoke Spanish. So this was an interesting thing. Pablo was a really great guy who was turning things. He helped me with the piccolo trumpet very much, and he had his own little factory now, also in close to Los Angeles, Pablo. And anyway, to make a long story short, which I always say, I finally decided to have these valve sections and bells finished because now I'm retired, retired on the 1st of December 2021, and now it's the 2nd of April 2022, and I thought, well, I better use the bells that I still have in the valve sections and finish off these trumpets. And so this is the first of two that I'm having Cornford finish off for me. The valve sections are from Bernhard Zierenbauer. The bells are partly from California and partly here in Germany. This is a smaller bell made by the firm Santner, and he makes very, very good bells. Gold brass. Now, gold brass is not the same in the United States as it is in Germany. It's different quantities of copper and whatever percent. So we're talking about higher percentages of copper and it's a balance between zinc and copper, and it makes a difference in the way that the instrument resonates, the sound of the bell and the way it rings. Now, of course, it's going to ring differently when it's held here with posts, so I'll ding that bell when I put it back on this horn. But in any event, the idea, I wanted it to be so simple as possible. With just one screw here, this screw comes off, just this one screw. If I put that right over here so it doesn't fall on the floor, I have to look for it. And then this bell should move right off like that. So it's held on by one screw. But these posts here are soldered here, but they're not soldered here, and they go through, and these are important nodal points on the instrument. These have to be placed right at the right place so the instrument resonates, and so it supports the resonance of the instrument. So basically, this is the valve section, then you have the tuning slide. These are what they call Überblas Wasserklappen. They're more for a little bit of options for trying to play in the high register if you want to start very softly, and they're not necessary for a well-constructed instrument, but I offer that with this because some people like to use them these days. So basically, without this pipe here and this pipe here is what I gave Chris Cornford, and then he added these extra parts to it following the construction of this instrument, which was finished, like I said, from my instrument maker, Mr. Heinz Poggensee in Leinach. He died last year, unfortunately, only 71, heart attack. And, so I'm going to change this bell right now, and so you can see what that's about. Now, after picking this up yesterday in Darmstadt, I said to Chris that I would like, for the next trumpet, the B-flat trumpet that he's going to make, with 3 bells, I would like these to be a little more massive, and I'd like these also to be a little bigger. Like this is, he says this is 2.5 millimeter drad, or these are not pipes, these are solid. But I'd like them double that size. But I like this instrument because the way he did it, because he's very consistent with the idea of presenting the let's see if I can put this together without forcing it. It's a prototype, it's brand new, so I don't want to force it in any way that's not necessary. Let's see if I can get this happening. And as I'm doing this, well, let's have a good look here before the time runs out on this first YouTube of the day. Richard Carson Steuart, the man with the horns. So I hope to see you again, and thank you for tuning in. I'll be playing a lot more in these YouTubes, so don't worry. Bye now.